This is Atomic Biscuits, and I'm your host, BACFA. Welcome, friends from around the world. It's another episode of Atomic Biscuits, number 2025-03-23, Capital Controls. We're going to start over at redstate.com this time. Tim Walz: Republicans are terrified of my masculinity and I can beat up Trump supporters. This is by Bitchute over on the website. Somehow, Tim Walz just keeps getting weirder. Since face-planting as Kamala Harris's running mate, the Minnesota governor has been holding rallies and making the media rounds in a desperate attempt to boost his stock for a 2028 presidential run. How's that going? Not well, Bob. It shows some video and some X-posts here from him. It's as if Walz was created in a lab by new DNC Vice Chair David Hogg to be the worst politician imaginable. With Harris still out there, presumably about to run for governor of California, I understand that's a bold statement. She's a hard one to top, and maybe she'll hold on to the crown, but man, is Walz an odd fellow who seemingly connects with no one but latte-sipping urban left-wingers. What makes it worse, though, is that he doesn't seem to realize just how weird he is, so his public interactions just keep devolving. Sure enough, that continued in his recent interview with Gavin Newsom, who has apparently abandoned his governing duties to become a podcast host. In this first clip, Walz claims he can kick most of their asses while speaking about Trump supporters. This link here is pretty jarring. Could you though, Tim? Could you? What an odd little guy this dude is. I'd love to find out what political consultants are making bank advising Walz, because a grift that good deserves recognition. As with Joe Biden, when he repeatedly did it, it should be noted that when you have to go around threatening to beat people up as a politician, you end up looking weak and pathetic. Keep in mind that Walz is the same guy who was too much of a coward to deploy with his unit while serving in the Minnesota National Guard, and then spent years stealing valor by falsely insinuating he served in a war zone. Still, the governor wants everyone to know that Republicans are terrified of his self-promoted masculinity. I'm not putting this in people's grill, says Walz, as he once again publicly tells people how absolutely, totally masculine he is. He can even fix a truck. And sure, he spent the 2024 campaign pretending to be a hunter while getting caught on camera not even knowing how to operate a shotgun, and a world-class football coach. But he's not trying to signal anything to you. It's all organic, you see. And just to make sure you understand that he's masculine and not trying to overcompensate, Walz told Newsom again how masculine he is. Yes, please double down on trying to call Republicans weird. I'm sure that'll work out brilliantly for you the next go-round. Honestly, my reaction to all this is that I am baffled that this guy thinks he's a viable presidential candidate. Politicians should have some level of self-awareness when it comes to this stuff. Clearly, Kamala Harris didn't, and we see how that ended for her. Walz is not him. He's not the guy to lead a Democratic Party revival, but if he wants to pretend he is, that's a very good thing for Republicans. It's also good for conservative commentators who need material, so keep it up, Tim. Again, that's over at redstate.com by Bitchute. Over at modernity.news, they have this article. Australian politician admits free speech is incompatible with a multicultural society. This is by Paul Joseph Watson. He said the quiet part out loud. Australian politician Chris Minns inadvertently said the quiet part out loud when he admitted that the existence of true free speech is incompatible with a multicultural society. The Premier of New South Wales tacitly admitted that in order to uphold the myth that diversity is our greatest strength, the freedom to say it isn't must be censored. I recognize, and I fully said from the beginning, we don't have the same freedom of speech laws that they have in the United States, and the reason for that is that we want to hold together a multicultural community and have people live in peace, said Menz. The politician made the comments in the context of new hate speech laws in Australia that were rushed through off the back of a hysterical moral panic based on a completely fraudulent narrative. The new legislation was introduced in response to a supposed terror attack plot on a child care center near a synagogue on the outskirts of Sydney. However, it subsequently emerged that the attack was actually a criminal con job, according to police, and that wasn't politically or racially motivated at all. The entire operation wasn't about mass destruction, it was a scam, reports reclaim the net. The alleged mastermind, reportedly a figure nestled deep within Australia's criminal underworld, was running a spectacular bluff. Plan: create an artificial crisis, let the media and politicians whip themselves into a frenzy, and then swoop in as the hero with inside information, possibly to negotiate a reduced sentence, distract police from other crimes, or simply revel in the chaos. MLC John Ruddock underscored the false pretext of the hate speech laws when he told Parliament, Parliament was misinformed by the Menz government about the urgency of the bills referred to in 1A, B, and C. This House calls on the Menz government to repeal the bills and apologize for both misleading this Parliament, preventing a parliamentary inquiry, and further curbing free speech principles by these reactionary bills. However, Menz refused to respond to Ruddock's argument and doubled down, glibly asserting that anyone who opposes draconian restrictions on free speech is facilitating racist abuse. As Christina Maas points out, as with all hate speech laws, they will inevitably be abused to silence Native Australians from speaking out about the failure of multiculturalism and diversity. These laws will be used against dissenters, against people who question government policies, against critics of the ruling ideology, she writes. Again, that's over at modernity.news. Well, they spent a decade smearing Trump. Now Hollywood celebrities are asking for his help to protect them from artificial intelligence. This is over at Breitbart.com. Hollywood celebrities took a break from calling President Donald Trump a fascist, a con man, mass murderer, and a dictator to sign a letter begging his administration to help them combat artificial intelligence. The letter, signed by more than 400 members of the entertainment industry, asked the administration to refrain from rolling back copyright protections they say would allow AI companies to exploit their work. We firmly believe that America's global AI leadership must not come at the expense of our essential creative industries, hundreds of Hollywood members said in a letter to Trump's Office of Science and Technology Policy, according to a report by Variety. To name a few of the smears celebrities have hurled at Trump, Hollywood film director Judd Apatow, known for The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Anchorman, and Talladega Nights, has called President Trump a mass murderer. Actor Mark Ruffalo just this week claimed President Trump is marching to dictatorship. Actor Ben Stiller, who in 2021 reacted to Trump getting banned from social media platforms, saying the president's so-called divisive rhetoric has real-life consequences. Actor Joseph Gordon-Levitt called Trump a con man. Bette Midler wished for someone to shiv or stab Trump. They, along with others, also signed up on the letter begging the Trump administration to hear their plea. Moreover, Netflix's Orange is the New Black star Natasha Lyonne, who just the other weekend went on a bizarre rant about a looming danger for American minorities and an alleged death toll in the U.S. under Trump, also signed the letter pleading with his administration help. The letter went on to claim AI companies are asking to undermine this economic and cultural strength by weakening copyright protections for the films, television series, artworks, writing, music, and voices used to train AI models at the core of multi-billion-dollar corporate valuations. Hollywood's letter was sent in response to OpenAI and Google recently asserting to the Office of Science and Technology Policy that United States copyright law should allow AI companies to train their systems on copyrighted material without first being granted permission. The letter accuses Google and OpenAI of arguing for a special government exemption so they can freely exploit America's creative and knowledge industries despite their substantial revenues and available funds. There's no reason to weaken or eliminate the copyright protections that have helped America flourish. The letter, which was also signed by Bette Midler, who has spent years incessantly attacking President Trump and his supporters, adds. Hollywood figures also lamented AI companies threatening movies, books, and music, as well as a slew of other professionals in their industry, with its demands for unfettered access to all data and information. These professions are the core of how we discover, learn, and share knowledge as a society and as a nation. The letter, which was also signed by Hollywood director Ava DuVernay, who has spent years disparaging President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, read. In their letter, Hollywood members amusingly took a break from calling the U.S. a fascist dictatorship to remind the Trump administration that America is actually a global cultural powerhouse that has become successful due to our fundamental respect for IP and copyright that rewards creative risk-taking by talented and hardworking Americans. We recommend that the American AI Action Plan uphold existing copyright frameworks to maintain the strength of America's creative and knowledge industries, as well as American cultural influence abroad. Singers Paul McCartney, Paul Simon, and Kim Gordon, as well as actresses Cynthia Erivo, Cate Blanchett, Aubrey Plaza, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Olivia Wilde, Lily Gladstone, Britt Marling, and Michaela Cole also signed the letter. Directors Judd Apatow, Guillermo del Toro, Cord Jefferson, Angel Manuel Soto, Ron Howard, and Sam Mendes, as well as actors Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Taika Waititi, and Showtime's Billions star Paul Giamatti were also signatories. Additional signees included comedian Chris Rock, singer Janelle Monáe, and filmmakers Bryn Mooser, Rian Johnson, and Alfonso Cuarón. FX's The Bear star Ayo Edebiri, who just last week called Elon Musk the head of Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, an idiot and a fascist, also signed the letter asking the Trump administration for help. That's over at Breitbart.com. The Gateway Pundit reported this week anti-Trump FBI agent arrested for disclosing classified information. Feds nabbed him as he was about to board international flight. This is by Christina Lila. An anti-Trump FBI agent was arrested and charged for disclosing classified information. Jonathan Boomer allegedly disclosed internal classified documents and text messages to associates. Court documents revealed that Jonathan Boomer had printed 130 files from the FBI's internal network, with many of the documents marked with warnings that the information is confidential. Boomer shared a draft of a book he was writing about his career in the FBI with colleagues, and it contained sensitive information, the charging documents said. According to ABC News, the feds nabbed Jonathan Boomer just as he was about to hop on an international flight Monday. ABC News reported, an FBI agent who accused the Bureau of political bias during President Donald Trump's first administration was arrested Monday in New York on charges related to the alleged unauthorized disclosure of confidential information, according to court documents filed Tuesday. Jonathan Booma, a 15-year veteran of the Bureau, allegedly shared text messages, internal documents, and other classified information with associates, including as part of a prospective book he began writing about his career as an FBI agent. Beginning in October of 2023, Booma printed approximately 130 files from the FBI's internal network, some of which were clearly marked with warnings that made clear that the information was to be protected, according to charging documents. Booma also printed 9 text file documents, which contained text that had been copied and pasted from reports that were marked in such a way that had made it clear that the government information must be protected, the charging documents said. In the ensuing weeks, Booma allegedly shared a draft of a book that he had written about his career at the FBI with associates over email. The draft allegedly included details about FBI investigations into a foreign country's weapons of mass destruction program, the charging document alleges. Last year, Jonathan Booma told Business Insider that political bias under Trump's first administration pushed him to become a whistleblower. Booma, a 15-year veteran of the FBI who speaks Russian, said that the FBI ignored his so-called leads linking Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, to Russian intelligence. Rudy Giuliani may have been compromised by individuals suspected of being involved in Russian counterintelligence influence operations, Jonathan Booma told Business Insider in an interview. I saw important intelligence information being suppressed. He also said the Hunter Biden Burisma story and the laptop from hell were part of a disinformation campaign. Booma was eventually prohibited from investigating anyone connected to President Trump. Again, this is over at thegatewaypundit.com. Now, I wonder if this is an echo of something that we hope to see. People who have flouted their responsibility to protect confidential information, doing with it what they will. I'm thinking about bathroom servers in Chappaqua. You know what I'm getting at? Spotted this blurb over on theblaze.com. Greenpeace may be forced to shut down after jury awards $660 million to pipeline company over defamation lawsuit. Posted again over at theblaze.com. It reads, environmental activist group Greenpeace has been ordered by a jury to pay more than $660 million in damages to a pipeline company over a defamation lawsuit. Energy Transfer, a Dallas-based company, and its subsidiary Dakota Access accused Greenpeace of defamation as well as trespass, nuisance, and civil conspiracy in relation to protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline in 2016 and 2017. The 9-person jury in North Dakota awarded the massive sum on Wednesday after only about 2 days of deliberations. The lawsuit accused Greenpeace of paying for protesters to demonstrate against the Dakota Pipeline, but the group said only that it had played a small part in support of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. Greenpeace had previously said that the pipeline company's claimed damages of $300 million would put the group out of business, and in the United States, the jury awarded more than twice that sum. Greenpeace USA senior legal advisor Deepa Padmanabha said the lawsuit was a threat to free speech rights. We should all be concerned about the attacks on our First Amendment and lawsuits like this that really threaten our rights to peaceful protest and free speech, he said. On the other hand, Energy Transfer lead attorney Trey Cox claimed the ruling was a victory for free speech. Peaceful protest is an inherent American right, he said. However, violent and destructive protest is unlawful and unacceptable. The environmental group said it would appeal the ruling. I've pointed this guy out in the past, and I've done some deep dives on him. He's one of those they're keeping on the back bench until they need him. And if you look at what is available on the front bench of what the Democrats have to offer, It's a lot of old guys who've run their course and they're really struggling, like with Walsh and his real tough guy attitude. They've got to find somebody with the same curb appeal as Democrats of bygone eras, like the Camelot days. And I guess with the release of the JFK files, this is just another good moment to do a trial balloon to see what the public thinks about him. The last couple of runs, they tried to Camelot him up a little bit, and it just didn't take. His behavior probably is part of it. He really doesn't seem to slide into the slick. Well, anyway, we're talking about JFK's grandson. It says here from the New York Times, yes, I'm using nytimes.com. I know you can't believe it. JFK's grandson slams file release and the news media's reaction. In a series of social media posts, Jack Schlossberg, a frequent critic of the Trump administration, said his family was not given a heads up about the release. Now, how long has this been being promised? I mean, the most recent big promise was in November, and then ever since. So I'm not sure what rock he's living under, or what he might be sniffing. This is by Stephen Kurutz. Jack Schlossberg, the only grandson of President John F. Kennedy, was not among the many people poring over the new trove of government files about Kennedy's assassination when it was released on Tuesday. Instead, Mr. Schlossberg was on social media criticizing President Trump, Republican lawmakers, and the news media over the handling of the files. Mr. Schlossberg, 32, the son of Kennedy's daughter Caroline Kennedy, and an outspoken voice in Democratic politics, has long been a critic of the Trump administration and its policies. During last year's election cycle, he made a series of comedic TikTok posts that mocked Republican candidates, as well as his cousin Robert Kennedy Jr., who was then running for president as an independent. But the unsealing of 64,000 pages of files about his grandfather's assassination under an executive order from President Trump made the political personal. In a series of posts on X that were fiery even by Mr. Schlossberg's standards, he said that the Trump administration did not give anyone in President Kennedy's family a heads up before the documents were released. Total surprise and not shocker, he wrote. The Trump administration did not immediately reply to a request for comment about Mr. Schlossberg's assertion that the Kennedys had not been advised on the release ahead of time. Beyond his own online thread about the files, Mr. Schlossberg also took issue with a post on X from Mike Lee, the senior senator from Utah and a Republican, who asked the question, "Why did it take so long to release the JFK files?" Mr. Schlossberg responded, "You really care about JFK's legacy? You're dismantling it." Mr. Schlossberg, who was hired last July as a political correspondent for Vogue, was also critical of the news media's extensive coverage of the decades-old documents. Standing in front of a wall-mounted TV tuned to CNN, in which the political correspondent Harry Enton and the anchor Aaron Burnett were discussing the JFK files as breaking news, Mr. Schlossberg said in a video post, "There's so much actual news. Why are you covering this? Stop." Mr. Schlossberg saved his harshest criticism for President Trump. He said that Mr. Trump has an obsession with his grandfather's death, but not his life or his policies. For instance, Mr. Schlossberg noted that the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, the agency the Trump administration has recently dismantled through job cuts and the freezing of foreign aid, was created by President Kennedy in 1961. Reached on Wednesday, Mr. Schlossberg declined to comment beyond what he had said on social media. The American public has long had a fascination with the Kennedy assassination. In 1992, after the Oliver Stone film JFK led to a surge of interest and conspiracy theories, Congress passed a law directing the National Archives and Records Administration to gather in one place all known U.S. government records relating to the Kennedy assassination. The law required all documents to be released within 25 years. About 99% of the known Kennedy papers have since been publicly disclosed, according to the National Archives. For Mr. Schlossberg, the assassination of his grandfather is both a national tragedy and an ongoing distraction. For decades, conspiracies surrounding his death have shifted focus away from the important lessons of his life and the critical issues of the moment, Mr. Schlossberg once wrote. They continue to do so today. Mr. Schlossberg didn't write those words on X yesterday, but in Time magazine in 2017. Anyway, it's they're trying really hard to put him in a place where he might be useful. He's kind of a stooge. He had an opportunity. There was a moment when he was still in college and on the rowing team, and it looked like that old glamour that you can remember back from the old days and from anyway, it's gone. There's nothing left of this clan but laughter. They need to just go on back to the Grey Gardens and fade away. I mean, JFK's biggest speeches, the ones that we listened to, I mean, he had some grand ideas and some big policies, and he also talked about the dark underbelly of the machine. The president is supposed to control, but sometimes does not. And the fact that Schlossberg brought up USAID, I thought was a little interesting. And in light of this article from theblaze.com, CIA's secret grip on USAID is finally exposed. What happens next? This is by Kent Hickenlifely. It says here, the agency's hold on media, politics, and global operations is under siege. With USAID's collapse, we may finally witness the deep state's unraveling. The Hill reported last week that Secretary of State Marco Rubio would cancel 83% of the U.S. Agency for International Development's programs, a total of 5,200 contracts, quote, essentially capping a dramatic fall for the foreign aid organization under the Trump administration, end quote. Rubio also expressly thanked the Department of Government Efficiency and his staff who worked very long hours to achieve the reform for USAID. As with the Watergate scandal that ended the Nixon administration, uncovering corruption often requires following the money. To borrow a phrase frequently used by Watergate journalist Carl Bernstein, this is much worse than Watergate. In my recent book, Twilight of the Shadow Government, How Transparency Will Kill the Deep State, co-authored with Kevin Shipp, a former CIA officer turned whistleblower, we examine the agency's malign influence on American politics. From manipulating financial interests to shaping media narratives, the CIA's reach extends far beyond intelligence gathering. We explore historical programs like Operation Mockingbird, which paid journalists to plant stories, and more recent efforts such as the seemingly benign Center for Global Engagement. USAID has long operated as a cutout for the CIA, providing cover for the agency to expand its influence abroad. Through USAID, the agency builds what it calls capacity in foreign countries, whether by establishing controlled media outlets or funding so-called charitable organizations. Cutting 83% of USAID's budget systematically dismantles the agency's ability to extend its reach into these nations. Ultimately, we propose 12 steps to reform the CIA, beginning with a crucial first move, breaking through the agency's unconstitutional shield of secrecy and taking control of its hidden budget. When President Harry Truman created the CIA in 1947, he intended it to serve as an intelligence-gathering body, essentially a daily briefing service for the president. The agency's first director, Allen Dulles, who had a much broader vision. During World War II, Dulles attempted to negotiate a separate peace with Nazi Germany aiming to install SS Chief Heinrich Himmler as Adolf Hitler's successor. Fortunately, that plan never succeeded. Dulles' machinations continued, however. He brushed aside the concerns of presidents like Dwight D. Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy, overthrowing countries under the pretense of stopping communist revolutions. Even Truman became concerned, famously publishing an op-ed in the Washington Post in December 1963, urging President Lyndon Johnson to remove the CIA's ability to engage in covert operations. What were once left-wing positions in the 1960s and 70s now form the core philosophy of the Trump administration, attracting figures like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and Elon Musk. The key to understanding today's crisis isn't just exposing corrupt individuals, whether Alan Dulles, John Brennan, or James Clapper, but dismantling the system that enables them to gain and wield power. Musk plays a crucial role in this effort. Corruption and wrongdoing exist in all groups, but the real challenge is minimizing harm. The solution is transparency. Information must be brought into the open so the public can make informed decisions, whether to reject or accept those in power. The Daily News Cycle provides various examples of the transparency promised by Trump and Musk, whether Musk inadvertently tries to sell a secret CIA facility in Northern Virginia, or a purge of recently hired CIA officers. Cutting, trimming, and restructuring the CIA is off to a good start, but it's far from complete. To solidify these gains over a rogue agency, Congress must establish effective oversight of the CIA for the first time. Lawmakers who have passed rigorous security investigations must be allowed to delve into the agency's operations, and the CIA must stop overclassifying relevant information under the excuse of state secrets. We need a strong intelligence service to provide reliable information to our president, but we also need an intelligence service that is subservient to the civilian government and does not, as President John Quincy Adams once warned, venture abroad in search of monsters to destroy. We must stop the forever wars abroad and the assault on our personal freedoms at home. Transparency is the only answer. Again, that is over at theblaze.com, and it's by Kent Heckenlively. Going to take a tour over to alt-market.us. Europe goes full totalitarian and puts the entire Western world at risk. I'll leave the link to this and all the stories I cover on Atomic Biscuits out on my account at Gab. You'll find me at BACFA. That's Bread and Circuses for America. This is by Brandon Smith. It's happening again. Europe is once again going totalitarian, and this time there's a decidedly familiar communist stench. The outcome was predictable for many of us in the alternative media, and the situation is only going to get worse in the next few years. But what does this mean for the rest of the world? With the European elites casting off their humanist masks and going outright Orwellian, what kind of chaos can we expect to unfold? First and foremost, I want to point out a key piece of irony here. For decades in the United States, we heard the tiresome argument that our Second Amendment gun rights are meaningless because they are unnecessary in maintaining our freedoms. Anti-gun rights activists and politicians commonly used Europe as their sterling example. If gun rights are so important for freedom, then what about the Europeans? They have strict gun laws, and they're not losing their rights. As Americans who understand what it means to fight a rebellion against tyranny and win, our response to this claim has always been the same: just give it time. Of course, we were right, and they were wrong. I'm sure a large number of people among the 95% of EU and UK citizens that are disarmed are probably wishing desperately for firearms right about now. The reasons why are numerous and horrifying. In the EU and UK, there's been a slow burn on censorship the past 10 years, which has recently exploded into a California Palisades-level inferno of speech restrictions. Door-to-door enforcement has increased as the public speaks out against multicultural policies. The excuse is always the same. Native Europeans are not allowed to criticize third world integration because it might hurt people's feelings. Any opposition to mass immigration is labeled hate speech. Movements for national identity and border security are regularly attacked in the media. In France and Germany, globalist officials are attempting to make it impossible for conservative-leaning political parties to participate in elections. In Romania, they have succeeded in disrupting the normal voting process, arresting populist candidate Călin Gorgescu after he won the first round of presidential elections. EU-controlled authorities have ruled that he will not be allowed to run again, and for those that think he was blocked due to Russian interference, well, they just blocked the candidacy of another conservative candidate simply because she criticized the EU. Romania is also tightening rules for online speech in an effort to silence public dissent. In true dystopian fashion, the powers that be call this protecting democracy. An even more disturbing trend is Europe's rising war rhetoric against Russia, with UK and French officials threatening the deployment of troops to Ukraine. Ukraine is losing the war badly, and globalists are hell-bent on cutting an artery and fomenting a world war. They insist that Ukraine must get back all captured territory and be allowed eventual NATO membership. In other words, a Russian victory cannot be allowed even if it means global conflagration. As I predicted in April of last year in my article, World War III is now inevitable, here's why it can't be avoided. The establishment is seeking to stage a domino effect in which Greater Europe and the U.S. are drawn into the Ukraine conflict. Even with a tentative peace deal being negotiated with the Russians right now, NATO members have promised to escalate tensions in Ukraine with boots on the ground and increase troop presence in Poland on the Russian border. Because of this development, European officials are actively and openly entertaining ideas of forced conscription, and the propaganda is starting to spread. It's important to note that the war rhetoric is gaining momentum in tandem with mass immigration programs and censorship enforcement. This is not a coincidence. This is a directed and coordinated conspiracy. The establishment is going for broke in light of the growing public shift away from progressive/socialist ideology. It's clear that the elites are afraid of a large-scale reformation, a return to nationalism, conservatism, meritocracy, and moral fortitude. Western culture is valued again, and people are acting to defend it. The movement will soon be impossible to stop, and the time of the globalists is running out. Because of online discourse and the alternative media, dominating the information space is no longer possible, so the elites are turning to physical force and imprisonment to silence their opponents. For now, Britain is the worst perpetrator, with citizens receiving intimidation visits from police and suffering arrests for posting offensive words and memes. Some are even being arrested for flying their national flag in the sight of migrants. Movements in support of populism are demonized and painted as racist or xenophobic, but these accusations are meant to distract from the very real cultural replacement being perpetrated in Greater Europe. Mass immigration and cultural replacement is a strategy the globalists have been trying in the United States for decades, and we're very familiar with the process. That said, I would suggest that Europe's invasion, which launched around 2014, is an even greater threat due to the religious zealotry of the migrants involved. Armies of Third World invaders, largely from Islamic nations, have flooded into the EU and UK and threatened to completely displace the native-born population. Muslims view the West as a cultural and spiritual enemy that needs to be brought under their control. Fundamentalists, around 70% of Muslims globally, believe that the entire world must one day submit to Islam and Sharia law. They revel in the invasion and see Europeans as cattle ripe for subjugation. There's no intent to assimilate, no hope for coexistence. That's not the goal. The elites are well aware of this dynamic and they welcome it. But why? Western civilization has been scheduled for demolition, and the establishment is using elements of third world alien cultures to do the grunt work of tearing that civilization down. I predicted the results of this program in my article, Britain is Proof. Globalists plan to use migrants as a mercenary army against the West, published in August of 2024. In that article, I noted, if Western populations are unified in opposing the globalist ideology, then the task of deconstruction becomes impossible for them. So they simply destroy the West from within by introducing millions of people that will never assimilate or unify. In other words, my argument was that migrants from the third world are not merely being used as unwitting tools for cultural saturation of the West. They're not being shipped in by the millions to simply live off fruits of our labor and our ancestors' labors. I believe they're being brought into the US, the UK, and Europe as enforcers for the establishment. I went on to explain the greater purpose of Western government using third world mercenaries. Keir Starmer and other government officials have been meeting with Muslim groups to reassure them that the government is on their side. The migrants are now emboldened to do as they please, while the Brits face the reality that if they fight back, the government will put them in prison. The migrants are now, in the most basic sense, a mercenary wing of the UK government. I would go even further and say that in the event of war with Russia, native-born citizens will be rounded up for conscription while most migrants are left behind to run the streets of London, Paris, and Berlin. I believe the migrants are enforcers to keep any potentially defiant Europeans in line. Many empires and monarchs throughout history have used foreign mercenaries as muscle to prevent local rebellion. The politicians in the EU and UK are following a similar strategy. If we track these patterns to their natural conclusion, I think it's clear that Europe is about to become a nexus for global change. They will either destroy the West with instability and authoritarianism, or their tyranny will inspire a modern-day crusade to save free civilization. In either case, they're about to create a mess. First, I think there will be definitely forced conscription, but I suspect there will be a lot more opposition and protests against this policy than the elites understand. No one in the West wants to die for Ukraine. There is no unifying moral imperative to enter into a war with Russia. People will resist. Second, there's going to be a heightened focus on speech controls and arrests unless the populace presents a unified response. This counter-movement will have to be prepared for violence because there's a good chance they will need to defend themselves. Third, governments will try to use economic leverage to silence dissent and punish people who refuse to comply. It's not a coincidence that the EU just announced they're going to be introducing CBDC programs at the retail level by the end of 2025. They're going to push for a cashless system because this will give them total control over people's economic access. Unless Trump pulls off some kind of diplomatic miracle with the deployment of EU and UK troops to Ukraine, it's predetermined. Anything to spark a volatile escalation, possibly to lure the US back into the fray under security obligations. Again, the globalists want World War III as a catalyst for a new world order. Fifth, Ukraine will fall to Russia regardless. This is already happening, but the media is trying to gloss over troop movements and geolocation data showing increasing territorial gains for Russia. They're also refusing to acknowledge the steep decline in Ukrainian conscripts under the age of 40. Without a Trump deal, Ukraine will implode. Europe does not have the troops or the training to fight Russia in a near-peer attrition-based conflict. Their involvement would only prolong the inevitable or trigger a nuclear exchange. Sixth, there's going to be severe diplomatic isolation between the United States and Europe. It has already started with NATO potentially breaking apart, and the response from our allies has been nothing but hostile. EU officials act as if they're entitled to American money and protection, but the question they need to ask is why? The leadership of Europe is deeply socialist, and they're utterly opposed to any conservative appeal to national and cultural identity. They hate borders. They hate Western culture. They hate meritocracy. They hate individual liberty. They hate Christianity, and they hate Americans in general. I don't think we have much in common with them anymore, and it doesn't make sense to be allies with people who would happily tear down everything we believe in. The United States and EU alliance is dead. After their latest authoritarian actions, it's time to cut ties or remove the globalists in power and change the dynamic. From my observations, there are millions of Europeans across the Atlantic hoping and praying right now that Americans intervene and remove these tyrants from their bureaucratic throne. While a breaking of ties is almost guaranteed, there is also a chance that a war between the United States and the European oligarchy is brewing. And there's more to read over at alt-market.us. TheGatewayPundit.com had the article from Wayne Root. Back in 2015, I wrote, "Is Supreme Court Justice John Roberts being blackmailed? This question is as valid today as a decade ago. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Way back in 2015, I asked in one of my nationally syndicated columns if Chief Justice of the Supreme Court John Roberts was being blackmailed. I laid out the case. It seemed obvious to me that he was either being blackmailed or bribed, or he was a fraud from day one. A deep state liberal plant disguised as a conservative put in place to vote the wrong way on key issues. Because Justice Roberts always votes against us, against the obvious conservative decision for most, if not all, of the important life or death decisions that changed this country's direction. Roberts voted to protect and save the Obamacare disaster and scam twice that destroyed the entire healthcare system of the United States. Roberts voted against asking about citizenship in the census. He voted against Texas being allowed to secure its own border with razor wire. He voted against Texas having standing to challenge the 2020 election. He just voted against the Trump administration's attempt to withhold pay from USAID contractors, which of course protects the deep state's fraud, waste, looting, and abuse of taxpayers. And now, just a day ago, Roberts publicly rebuked and rejected President Trump's desire to see an out-of-control federal judge impeached for trying to stop the deportation of illegal alien gangbangers who have committed the worst crimes in our country. Roberts tried to intimidate Trump and fool the nation. The Supreme Court has nothing to do with the impeachment of a judge. Only Congress can decide that. Again, I ask, whose side is Roberts on? Because he sure isn't on the side of conservative patriots. Again, I ask, is Justice John Roberts being blackmailed? Here's my column from 2015. Compare it to what's happening today. Nothing has changed in a decade. It's time to start asking the question. It's time to be cynical. It's time to assume the worst of this government. Has Supreme Court Justice Roberts been blackmailed or intimidated? I would put nothing by this Obama administration that lives and rules by the Chicago Thug playbook. Doubt me? On the same day that Justice Roberts provided the key vote to save Obamacare again, IRS watchdog reported to Congress that the IRS purposefully destroyed evidence of a crime. Is the idea implausible that this same Obama administration that orders IRS attacks, then orders destruction of key evidence, would stop at nothing to save Obama's signature achievement, Obamacare? Is it impossible to believe that Obama and his socialist cabal that learned from Saul Alinsky that the ends justify the means would hold something over a Supreme Court justice's head to save Obamacare? Is that the purpose of government agencies like the IRS and NSA? To listen to us, to watch us, to find something we've done wrong and then use it to intimidate, harass, threaten, or extort key political figures so that Obama can fundamentally change America? Because something clearly smells rotten in Washington, D.C., like the mafia delivering a dead fish to your door rotten. Justice Roberts was appointed by President Bush to become the key conservative vote in America in important decisions that affect the fundamental transformation of the country. Justice Roberts clearly was born, raised, and groomed for one job in life: to join that Supreme Court, strike down Obamacare, protect the Constitution, and end Obama's big government overreach. Yet Roberts is the man responsible for saving Obamacare twice. His legacy will be that he protected big government, supported government overreach, wrecked health care, and helped to hasten the fundamental transformation of America. I have felt the same way about Speaker of the House John Boehner and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell for years now. Something is wrong. All it takes to destroy America and pass Obama's agenda is to control a few key, powerful positions in D.C., and all it would take to do that is blackmail. Find out the weak link of a key political leader or government official and hold it over their heads. Am I being too cynical? Really? Do you think former House Speaker Dennis Hastert might be a child molester who had gay sex with underage boys? Well, you can see this link at ABC News. Because Hastert sure had everyone fooled. He looked like a choir boy, but he clearly did something terrible that forced him to agree to pay $1 million in blackmail, and it's odd that the government knew about it How did they know to question him about taking $1 million of his own money out of his own bank account? Maybe they know everything. What makes anyone think that the government and its three-letter agencies, IRS, DOJ, FBI, CIA, NSA, don't know everything bad about everyone in key positions in D.C.? What makes you think that blackmail isn't happening every day to conservative politicians, except it's the government doing the blackmailing? You know, the same government that asked the IRS to target key critics of President Obama, like me, and then ordered the IRS to destroy the evidence. Just a guess, but here's how I think it goes. I think they offer a carrot and a stick to key politicians or judges like John Boehner or Justice Roberts. They threaten to expose something terrible like an affair or corruption or immorality that would shock the nation, ruin your career, destroy your legacy, destroy your marriage, destroy your relationship with your children, and leave you unemployable after you are forced to resign. That's what's behind door number one. Or, if you see the light and vote our way, you get to continue playing big shot. Your legacy is untouched. Your family loves you. You get to stay in office and you retire someday to a $5 million per year lobbying job like Dennis Hastert. That's what's behind door number two. Which would you choose? Trust me, those options are being offered every day by the Obama crime family to key political figures in D.C. Republicans are being blackmailed, intimidated, extorted, and bribed. That explains Justice Roberts and the Supremes ruling against us again. That explains why we keep winning elections, yet we keep gaining nothing and losing everything. It's all been fixed. The Obama crime family is in charge. Again, that's Wayne Allen Root over at thegatewaypundit.com. Now, there's been some guessing that perhaps something in the Epstein files and some adoption stuff, there's a lot of rumor mill stuff that go along with this Supreme Court justice, and why he, after being put in place to do the people's bidding in the conservative realm, has voted consistently the opposite way. And there's some signal and there's a lot of noise. But I ask what Mr. Root does. How much of this is going on throughout the political sphere? How many people are being controlled? Whether it's something destructive like a bomb planted behind the eye at a major clinic, or threatening your family, or making sure that people get into car accidents that they can't walk away from. We see it. We see the edge of it. And we know it's going on. The question is, who's doing it? Maybe it's the Obama crime family. Maybe it's foreign influence. Maybe it's a threatened deep state apparatus that is being starved out with Doge cuts. We have a lot to think about. We have a lot to clean up. And we have a lot to do here in the United States. I hope you guys are having a wonderful spring. The weather is warming here in the Northern Hemisphere, and I know things are cooling off in the Southern Hemisphere. I hope you're having a wonderful week. Remember to spend time with your family, focus on the things that you can control, and live life to the fullest. I will see you on the next episode of Atomic Biscuits. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for Atomic Biscuits. Tune in again next week for more news and music. Check out BACFA on Gab at BACFA, as well as Bitchute, Rumble, D-Live and Odysee. Check out LastScoutRadio.com for fun content. Listen to WBN 324 on radio stations around the world, on many streaming platforms, and World Broadcasting Network WBN 324.zil.